these sweeteners offered what was thought to be a healthy solution, to still be able to enjoy the sweet taste of certain foods without having the calories.
Welcome to the Ultra Healthy Now podcast, where your journey to feeling younger, sexier, and more energized begins. Dr. Nicole Srednicki, who specializes in high-performance health, will dive into practical, actionable tips and strategies that can transform your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Join us as we uncover the secrets to living a healthier, happier life, mind, body, and spirit. Because true health, beauty, and happiness start on the inside.
Today, we're diving into the sweet world of sweeteners, artificial sweeteners versus natural and traditional sugars. And we're going to be answering the question if they're actually really healthy for you. I'm your host, Alexandra, and of course, with our expert, Dr. Nicole Srednicki, to answer all of these questions. And as you guys know, there's so many different alternatives in the market. Nicole, what are the different types? Can you give us a little bit of background on these sweeteners?
Yeah. So over the years, we have developed so many different types of sweeteners. Starting back in actually 1879 was our first artificial sweetener substitute, which people loved because it tasted like sugar, but without all the calories. Started back then, and then we've slowly learned more about health benefits versus health hazards of some of these artificial sweeteners. These are things like erythritol, aspartame. You see these types of things in a lot of like diet sodas and diet foods. And then there's natural sweeteners, such as monk fruit or stevia. There's a few other newer ones. And then there's traditional sugars. So you have your just regular table sugar, raw sugar, agave, honey, different things like that.
Yeah. And, you mentioned so many different types, which is what we see generally in the supermarket, and they're all advertised as healthy. Are these artificial sweeteners bad for you? And what's the evidence behind this?
Yeah. So some studies have raised concerns about the potential health risks associated with long-term consumption of artificial sweeteners. While regulatory agencies have deemed them to be safe for consumption in moderate amounts, some research suggests possible negative links to health outcomes, such as metabolic syndrome, which is abnormal blood sugars and weight, dysfunction in your gut, and then increased risks of certain cancers. Additionally, some individuals may experience gastrointestinal discomfort or adverse reactions from these artificial sweeteners. And one other thing to note is that these are regulatory agencies in the United States. So in other countries, some of the artificial sweeteners are prohibited. So it just depends where you are located and what you're reading.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's incredible because a lot of things, can be approved in the US. That's from what I've seen, right? And then, for example, in Europe, it's not allowed, right? Because of these consequences. And I see all the time now with friends that a lot of people have like IBS, all these gastrointestinal metabolic issues. And so, you start to question what's the correlation here with what the US has been producing, right? And you always tell me weigh the pros and the cons. So, how do natural sweeteners compare in terms of their impact on our health?
Yeah. So with natural sweeteners, they're going to be perceived as healthier because they're less processed. Artificial sweeteners are basically made in a lab. There's nothing natural about them. And I think that's what also gives rise to some of these potential cancer risks. When you're putting foreign things into your body doesn't know how to break it down. And so because of that, it can start to cause cells to misfire. And that's what can sometimes cause, a disruption or potential cancer development. So then when we look at some of the natural sweeteners, because they're more natural, there's a little bit less association with that because they aren't made from chemicals. So a lot of people will prefer to have natural versus processed.
Got it. And when you say natural, for example, what like my question, right? Something I use daily is stevia. Does that fall under natural or artificial? Where does that fall in?
Yeah, stevia comes from a plant, and so it is actually natural, and they have to get it into the sugar form or sugar sweetener form. But it is a much they aren't really, taking it and totally manipulating it like they do with the artificial sweeteners. So,
Okay,
um,
okay. But I have, and I was seeing too, and this can be, kind of controversial, that sometimes stevia can also cause insulin spikes. Is that accurate? Or
sorry, can you repeat that?
that sometimes stevia can cause insulin spikes? Is that accurate? Or
So depending on which type of sweetener we are looking at, there are even we see it more so with the artificial sweeteners where your body thinks it's actually sugar, and we have seen increases in insulin, which can lead to diabetes. So it can be bad. To a lesser degree, the more natural ones, but you also have to be careful how they are made. So in some recent research with monk fruit. That's a very popular natural sweetener. But what's important is you need to look at the ingredients because sometimes they are mixed with the artificial. So I've seen a lot of the monk fruits mixed with erythritol, and erythritol is we with a lot of use of erythritol, we're seeing increased risks of heart attack and stroke. So your natural sweetener can become a very bad sweetener if it's mixed with some of these artificial. So look at the ingredients. If you're using monk fruit or stevia, make sure it's not mixed with erythritol. It should just be that straight ingredient.
yeah, and that's important too because even though it's might be low calorie, natural, whatever, or it also still creates, at least in my experience, like when I was on my stevia high and all this stuff, I was still very much addicted and craving sugar. And although I was using these different alternatives, I was still craving something insatiably throughout the day of like sweet, sweet, sweet 24/7. And so, your brain can't really distinct those two, at least in my experience, where it was almost like, okay, I might as well just have regular sugar at this point. But just to go back in time a little bit too, how did the concept of artificial sweeteners even start and what initiated the development and the use of artificial sweeteners?
So they artificial sweeteners actually during World War One and World War Two, there were sugar shortages. And so then they needed to have some sugar alternatives. And this era marked a turning point for artificial sweeteners like saccharin or cyclamate, which gained a lot of popularity. The scarcity of sugar during these wartime periods played a significant role in propelling the development and commercialization of artificial sweeteners. And then in the mid 20th century, concerns about calorie consumption and obesity started to rise, leading to the increased interest of these artificial sweeteners as a way to reduce caloric intake and manage weight. And these sweeteners offered was thought to be a healthy solution to still be able to enjoy the sweet taste of certain foods without having the calories. And this caused a major shift in consumer behavior and a huge growth in the artificial sweetener industry. Artificial sweeteners also became essential. So, the doctors were absolutely back in the day recommending, drink diet instead of regular if you had diabetes to help satisfy that sugar craving without at the time thinking it's not affecting blood sugar levels. So they thought that it was a very valuable tool. Yeah.
And we're gonna go into all the side effects later on in the show, but at Rich Dad, we always say follow the money, right? And so even from my marketing lens, which is my expertise, marketing advertising has played such a pivotal role in popularizing artificial sweeteners. And the industry has invested heavily into promoting the benefits of sugar-free and reduced calorie products. And again, at least from my knowledge or from my experience, this doesn't necessarily equal health, right? Just because it's low calorie does not mean it's healthy ingredients. And this aggressive marketing campaign has contributed to the spread acceptance of the use of these artificial sweeteners amongst all of us, right? Amongst me, amongst a lot of my colleagues, these listeners. And the introduction of sugar-free and diet versions of popular products, just like the sodas, Diet Coke, whatever, desserts, has fueled the rise of these sweeteners. These products, cater to consumers seeking to reduce the sugar and calorie intake. And I just want you to discuss a little bit more about that because I think it's important for all our viewers to know that again, low calorie does not equate to health.
Yeah, and, kind of thinking on that, the marketing topic, I actually noticed when I was getting, I always love to look at labels, and I was in the pet food store the other day, and I saw erythritol in a pet treat. So please, like, even when you're getting your pet food, like, now they're marketing to, they're gonna make diet dog treats. And I'm sure my little Frenchie bunny does not care if there's erythritol or no erythritol. He doesn't need it. It's not healthy for him because I want him to live forever.
Yeah.
Uh, but the artificial sweetener market is valued at $2.3 billion.
All of
And
the money.
it's a yeah, and it's some of the now health concerns are kind of being like pushed, it's not being addressed. And with excessive use of artificial sweetener use, this is definitely, causing health issues, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, high blood pressure, and they're finding can actually result in insulin issues and obesity.
Yeah. And now that we're bringing all that up, I do want to dive deeper into, the risk of cancer associated to these or like even Alzheimer's. And so what are some of the main health risks associated with the consumption of these artificial sweeteners? I know you mentioned some, but can we dive a little bit deeper into that so that people can actually know what they're putting in their body can actually have a serious effect on them in the long term?
Yeah. As we mentioned, like the insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulations, these sweeteners can trigger insulin responses in your body. And what that means is your pancreas, so when you drink this diet soda, is releasing all this insulin and that's trying to get, this artificial sweetener to go where it should go. But then your body doesn't know how to break that down. And it causes some of these dysregulations and your body doesn't know how to break that down. So then it starts to create inflammation in your body. Meanwhile, your body's still producing more and more insulin and guess what? That pancreas can actually eventually get worn out and that's how diabetes starts. So being aware of what we're putting in our bodies. I think something that you kind of touched on already is that you kind of used to be addicted to the sweeteners. We have like chemicals in our brain that start to cause that addiction and then we crave more and more. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves and be aware of that and really, oftentimes it depends what your health history is, but I will tell people, you're better having the natural form of sugar in moderation. That means like you're making it yourself. You're not like going out to restaurants and eating their desserts and cocktails and all these things that are loaded with sugar. You're really listening to your body and using self-control. So they can have their half a teaspoon of sugar, in their coffee or whatever, versus pouring 2 packets of stevia, right? So that when we're looking at overall health and inflammation, a lot of times that you're going to be better off that way. And you're going to feel good about it that you're able to make these decisions and not like succumb to more and more of these artificial or natural sweeteners.
Yeah,
Um,
and as a community of entrepreneurs too, it's like we can't we do not have time for that sugar crash and right and even the stevia in my experience has caused that right where I'm like okay I'll have like a sweet tooth and then I'm also constantly thinking about the sugar being distracted from my other day-to-day to-dos. And then I get a little bit of a sugar crash. I don't feel as productive, especially, back then I used to do like follow all these fitness instructors on TikTok and Instagram where they give you all this health advice of low calorie foods, of all these fake processed stuff, right? Because they're healthier. But in reality, you don't feel healthy after consuming them. And, I was constantly getting sick. And I see it, people nowadays too, the ones that consume all this processed food and their Coke Zero or whatever are usually the ones that like, you know, gain weight in the long run, have hormonal issues, also don't have an optimized energy level, are always getting sick. And so, I start to wonder, is there a correlation between all this fake stuff that they're putting in their body and what they're actually reflecting, right?
Yeah, exactly. We see higher rates of headaches, migraines, depression, as I already mentioned, heart disease, cancer when people are using excessive amounts of these sweeteners.
Mhm. And in the previous show that we recorded that we talked about detoxing your body, I brought up my bloating issue, right? And I don't doubt that that had anything to do with some of the fake stuff I was putting in my body. And so what are some of like, I guess, these more normal day-to-day side effects that viewers can be experiencing, just like bloating, or maybe like their bowel movements. What are some of those indicators that perhaps, you know, could be happening from consuming things like this?
Yeah, so if you're having excessive amounts and cramping, excessive gas, diarrhea, constipation, headaches, migraines, and just feeling that low energy or just kind of like all over achy.
Mhm.
And then you have to look at it. Is it really worth having the excessive sweetener to have that like it's like a quick fix? And then you get all these disgusting side effects or symptoms and, is that really worth it?
Yeah, you always tell me weigh the pros and the cons. And so honestly, before making any health decision in my life, I'm always like, okay, what are the pros and the cons here? And I evaluate. And that's not to say, I still, again, I'm a sweet tooth person. I like sweets. Maybe someone listening to us likes their sweets, right? So you also have to measure, I guess, and just like in as an entrepreneur, how do you want to improve? What kind of discipline? Do you want food to have control over you, or do you want to be mentally stronger, right? So I'll allow myself a sweet tooth treat, but I won't be trying to constantly satisfy that poor habit in my life on a daily basis. Um as opposed to I'll live a healthy lifestyle throughout the week and then I'll reward myself with something because it's okay to reward yourself, but in moderation. Um and I also want to talk about, so as we mentioned, there's different types of sweeteners. Can you outline the fundamental differences between the natural sweeteners, sweeteners derived from natural sources, and then artificial sweeteners?
Yeah. Artificial sweeteners are totally different than sweeteners that are derived from natural substances. Like, as I mentioned, natural, meaning like monk fruit, stevia, Lauhan Gao, that's a newer one. They all have the pros and cons. The more natural the sweetener, typically it's going to be less destructive than the artificial. However, long term studies are needed on even these natural sweeteners. And then, as I mentioned, I really want to emphasize that this erythritol is commonly added to monk fruit and stevia sweeteners. So please be aware of it. And our bodies, as I mentioned, they handle artificial sweeteners much different than natural. What role does the body's ability to recognize and process natural sugars play in maintaining balanced blood sugar levels and avoiding insulin responses triggered by some of the artificial flavors or sweeteners? Simply, your body recognizes sugar molecules and they have to, we need them to attach to different cofactors to break it down. So your body's able to get the sugar where it needs to go within the body. It's important to remember that if you abuse sugar, your body's natural metabolism process can become dysfunctional. And this is what leads to weight gain, diabetes, etc. And on the other hand, artificial sweeteners are more foreign to the body and therefore makes it difficult for your body to break it down. When these foreign substances aren't metabolized process or when they aren't metabolized properly, it can lead to cellular dysfunction and inflammation. Inflammation is the foundation of like every disease. So if you want to lower the risks of developing chronic disease, you want to try to focus on getting inflammation out of your body. And when I say inflammation, I don't mean like a sore ankle. I mean like tissue inflammation, cell inflammation. These are the things that we want to be aware of.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and as I mentioned too, the key is moderation when it comes to sugar. When you look at labels, there is sugar in like everything. You could pick up salad dressing and there could be 10 grams of sugar in a teaspoon of it. And most people use way more than a teaspoon of salad dressing, barbecue sauce, all different things. You go in a restaurant, like there's sugar sneaking into everything and sometimes artificial as well. So limit your sugar intake. Look at labels. When you're, I had a patient walk in the other day with drinking a fruit drink. So they thought they're drinking something healthy. And I asked them, do you know how much sugar's in that? And so they turn the bottle around and they look and, she
Yeah.
said, "Oh, yeah, there's 23 grams in here." She's like, "Oh, wow, that's a lot." And I said, "Here, let me see it." And I look and I said, "Actually, there's 46 because there's actually 2 servings in that 8-ounce bottle." So, yeah, in just a fruit drink, smoothies are
Yeah.
notorious. I know one of your favorite old snacks was acai bowls.
Yes, I knew you were gonna say that, Nicole. I knew you were gonna
Uh,
say that. I will admit, before starting with you, I would never read labels. I was the typical person that would fall for all the healthy advertisements, smoothies, green smoothie, green juice. Um, and it's sad because it is a trap, right? Like there's so many people that are not awoken or aware of these things. And so I would go in thinking I was healthy, and then I was gaining weight, feeling sluggish, not feeling healthy at all. Um, and then once I shifted my life to reading labels, even the natural stuff, like you said, has junk in it. And so now all I do is read labels before even buying anything because what is it even worth to pay that higher price tag for something natural if it's not truly natural, right? So and obviously it's important to eat as clean as possible, as natural homemade that you can, but we're humans. We go out to eat with our friends, right? And I remember on this trip with Nicole, I have my typical acai bowl, healthy breakfast. And then she's like, "Oh, those are loaded with sugar." And I was like, "What do you mean, Nicole? Like, this is acai, my antioxidants." Um, and we walked through some of the labels. These acai bowls have not only that, it has a lot of calories. So it was like 1,000 calories, which is what should be, it's a close to my intake per day. And then it was loaded with sugar. So obviously I was not feeling healthy consuming those acai bowls. And I mean, I can't even remember how much sugar the acai bowl was filled with, but it's evil. It's purely evil what we fall for and then what we put in our body without even knowing that we're putting that junk into our body.
Yeah, I think it actually had I did some research after the fact, and they have found some of them have upwards of 70 grams of sugar. So, and it's so I feel so bad because, patients are sometimes misled by the
Yeah.
marketing of these, supposed healthy, things out there. They might be like, "Oh, this is gluten-free," but then they don't realize that it's like entirely made out of sugar because guess what? Sugar can be gluten free.
Mhm.
So, really kind of becoming aware, looking at labels and understanding, what's going on in your body. There's a lot of people that already have insulin resistance or what's called pre-diabetes. They don't even know they do. So, really becoming aware of this because once you develop diabetes, it can just kind of be horrible to try to manage it and can go downhill very fast. And it is something that you can reverse. If you have type 2 diabetes, if you can, eat right, make good decisions, be aware of these artificial versus, natural sugars. You can influence. I've had multiple patients that we've been able to do that, and it's so empowering and they feel
Mhm.
so much better.
And Nicole, I'm curious just because I've seen this on the internet too, where it's like I always ask Nicole like all my internet questions. So I'm like, is this true? But okay, right. Let's say we're facing the reality of we're gonna have something, a healthier sweet alternative, right? I don't know whether that's your berries, cup of berries, banana, whatever it may be. Um, is it possibly true, or is there evidence behind this that maybe eating like a protein before it can help neutralize that insulin spike? So as opposed to it skyrocketing with eating the banana in itself, you have like an egg prior and then it'll like help decrease that spike. Is that true?
It can help a little bit, and it can also make you feel satisfied sooner. So sometimes you'll eat a little bit less.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point you make. But again, some people will kind of like take this stuff and run with it, and they'll eat an entire, they'll eat a gigantic, uh, burger, and then
Yeah.
be like, oh, here it's going to neutralize my
The Ben and
sweet I'm
Jerry's.
gonna have after it. Yeah, so, again, it's like moderation, really being aware, so that you don't end up with excessive sugar or the caloric intake with
Yeah.
it. So if you're gonna eat a protein before, it's something very lean,
Mhm.
lower in fat and a small amount. And, mindfulness, that's, mindful eating. When you're eating these sugars or whatever, don't sit in front of the TV eating them. Eat mindfully, and a lot of times you'll end up eating less and feel more satisfied.
Yeah, and that's true. Having a lean protein before it does help because sometimes, I'll just serve myself that sweet thing that I wanted and then I want more and more, right? And obviously it's an addiction. Like it's literally something that in my body it produces me to want more and more and more. And it's like I hate that feeling again as an entrepreneur where like just discipline is so important for me. It's like how will I possibly let this little thing of sugar dictate my actions right now?
Yeah.
Um but Nicole, I know you're not much of a sweet tooth, but for people listening to us, what would you say is like the lesser evil of these two options or like a healthier alternative of the options we mentioned of like these sugars and fake and natural and whatever? What do you recommend?
Yeah.
Or what would you recommend?
So, well, first of all, I think you already mentioned it. Um, Detoxing every so often can help reset these addictions. I can't tell you how many people we've been able to get off of their soda addictions or, just craving that sweet. Once you go through this, for example, our ultra healthy detox is a 21-day program. 21 days is when neuroplasticity kicks in, and that's when our body actually creates new neural pathways and can help to reset. So, we don't tend to crave those healthy things. Usually, like by the time you finish that, you're like, wow, like your taste buds have been reset. You don't want to then turn to that chocolate cake or whatever
Yeah.
you
And
loved before.
And it's funny because sugar was a very happy part of my life. It was also a really sad one because I would hit that crash and just all those side effects that we mentioned was what I experienced, right? Um, and so, but it's funny because after a couple of the detoxes, or even the very first one, sugar didn't taste like that to me anymore. Like gelato just tasted like fake chemicals when I was putting it in my mouth. And so it's kind of weird because when I go for something sweet thinking that I want it because I'm so used to like my old habits, I also realize, this doesn't bring me the joy or the taste that I used to want. And so now I prefer, dark chocolate or dates or whatever it may be because that stuff is just it tastes fake, right? So that's something to expect out of the detox. A great positive side effect from the detox, but obviously, yeah, just keep in mind that you will no longer crave those things anymore. Um, but out of all the sugars we mentioned, Nicole, I know there's monk fruit, coconut sugar, natural sugar, stevia. Which one, I guess, would you pick?
So if it is my overall pick, if it's in extreme moderation, teaspoon or less, using one of like the most unprocessed, a raw sugar or a coconut sugar would probably be my pick, unless you're already pre-diabetic or have diabetes. You really then have to go with the more natural, like the monk fruit or stevia. But again, you want to work on that addiction so that you're not craving that. And it depends on the situation. Like if you're sick, a lot of people like honey for the medicinal uses of it. It can have some healing properties. So if you're sick, maybe you have, a little bit, a half teaspoon of honey in your tea, but be aware that the honey has more sugar per teaspoon than just regular sugar. So again, you don't want to be using honey all the time. Get used to measuring these things. People don't realize what a serving size is. It's usually much less than what you're thinking. Agave, I tend to stay away from. They have found that is really reducing insulin sensitivity. So this is bad. Finding some major issues with that. And that has a lot. I think that can have almost 14 grams of sugar in a tablespoon, I believe, versus much less in just like, a raw sugar.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nicole. That was our healthy hack for the show. I'm so happy, especially for my own personal sake, that we discussed this topic into more detail. For all those sweet tooth listeners out there, I hope this show helped you. Remember to subscribe to the channel, leave us a review, and stay tuned for all the upcoming incredible episodes where we're going to be shedding light on so many of these things. Visit ultrahealthyhuman.com if you want more resources. And in our next episode, we're going to be diving into dissecting supplements, especially because I know some have become viral. Some celebrities have, produced their own supplement line. I talked about this with Nicole because I was super curious. And so we're going to be talking about that on the next show as well. So before you purchase any of your supplements, make sure to listen to this show because I think it'll shed some very important light on this topic. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We've explored all the different kinds of sweeteners, from artificial to natural, to tips and health hacks, to if you want to actually consume them. And just remember, when it comes to sweeteners, knowledge is power. Listen to this show before having your little sweet tooth snack. And we'll see you guys next time. I hope you guys have a very healthy life. Stay informed before our next show and live a sweet life as well without all the fake stuff in it. So see you guys next time. And thank you for watching the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ultra Healthy Now podcast with Dr. Nicole Srednicki. To discover more, visit ultrahealthynow.com and jumpstart your wellness journey with our 21-day detox program, a total body reset, more energy, better focus, and weight reduction. Our carefully formulated, high-quality supplements will aid in a new level of wellness. Don't wait. Unleash the Ultra Healthy Human within you. At Ultra Healthy Human, Eastern and Western modalities are combined with cutting-edge technology to guide personalized health programs to help you tap into the limitless potential of your mind and body. Because true health, beauty, and happiness start from within. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this episode wherever you listen to podcasts.
And before we sign off, I want to make it crystal clear that the information presented here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. This episode should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And while we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, the content discussed in this podcast is based on general knowledge and research available at the time of recording. Medical knowledge and guidelines can evolve, and what we discuss may not always reflect the most current research or recommendations. If you have specific health concerns or questions, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare professional or medical specialist who can provide personalized advice tailored to your unique circumstances. Every individual's health situation is unique, and what works for one person may not be suitable for another.
This podcast is a presentation of the Rich Dad Media Network.